make a presentation, and he'll give you a little bit of background about what he does and is a little bit of his history. And then he's gonna make a presentation, and then it'll be open up for questions too. So we'll get started, John.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Pat, for the invitation here. What I think I will do here is I've got a couple of copies of my resume that I'll pass out here, and I'll give you a little bit of my background here. And I didn't bring copies for everybody, so if people could share, that would be very helpful. I figure there's only so many trees I want to kill today.
No, we got a bunch of dead ones, you could have all the time.
Oh, we got tons, yeah.
Okay, so. Okay, so my name is John Kisselish, and before we get started here, wanted to kind of lay down a couple of ground rules here for everybody. Number one is, if anybody has an interest in recording this, feel free to. Anything here, anything that I say here or anything anybody else says, feel free to record it if you wish. I have this camera here that is recording right now, so that way we can get all the question and answers here, and then we get that posted on YouTube, and then get people the link, and then that can be shared with people, so on and so forth. So that so that's what we're going to do with that there. But if you want to record on your phone, feel free to, no problems.
Yeah.
The second thing here is that I'm here to talk about cities and township forms of government. I'm not here to talk about personalities. As far as like using names to reference city staff or names to talk about council members, my request here is if you want to talk about a mayor or council or a township, just speak about them generically. I don't know any of these people. So if you mention a name, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure if I've met your mayor, council members, town board supervisors. I don't think I've met any of them, so those names wouldn't mean anything to me. And really, names of various individuals, staff, elected officials, whatever, kind of somewhat irrelevant to this issue that you have before you, which is the question of whether you want to dissolve the city and move into a township form of government. Third thing here is, since we're recording the meeting here, we have to make sure that we only have one person speak at a time. And then I would ask that if it's like if you're going to ask a question, if you could state what your name is. So then that way, when people do watch this on YouTube or whatever, that they'll know who the person is who asked the question, and that just helps out everybody. Because I'm sure there'll be people in town here that will watch this on YouTube, and they'll want to know who asked what questions. So to start off this here, let me share a little bit about background about myself here. So I work as a political consultant and a lobbyist. I also work as an executive director for a trade group of solid waste haulers. I have also owned a print newspaper. I spent 10 years publishing legal notices out in the Anoka County area. I was the official legal newspaper for Anoka County, Ham Lake, City of Oak Grove, City of Now Then. And I also spent, from 1995 to roughly 2003 working for the Minnesota Senate. And I also spent from 2000 to 2004 from 2000 to 2002, I was mayor in the city of Roseville. Roseville has a population of about 35,000 people at night and about 100,000 people during the day. I think we currently have like about a $60 million budget in the city of Roseville, and that's where I currently live. And so from 2000 to 2002, I was mayor, and from 2002 to 2004, I was mayor and majority leader. Projects that I work on down at the legislature are sewer and water funding for rural cities in greater Minnesota. My focus generally is more in the southwest corner of Minnesota, places down in the Marshall area, Wilmer area. And so I work with small cities of this size all the way up to, I I think Tracy has 3,000-4,000 people. The town of Revere is roughly about the same size as this city is here. Other bullet points here, I work with citizen groups a lot of times on ballot question issues. So in 2024, I helped citizen groups in the city of Anoka and the city of Mounds View pass what was called charter amendments, so changing their city constitutions, and we won both of those elections. And then the city came back a couple months later and tried to undo them, and we defeated City Hall 2 out of 2 times. And then I also helped defeat a sales tax referendum in the city of Roseville. So I sometimes get involved in various projects like that. I served on a policy committee with the League of Minnesota Cities many years ago, and I served as a Roseville Reserve police officer for a couple of years. And let's see, other background here that might pertain here is also serve as one of the things I enjoy doing is I spend a lot of time teaching kids about citizenship and government through scouting, because I'm a merit badge counselor for citizenship in the community. So in fact, I'll be doing that next week. So that's always fun, talking to kids and getting kids educated in how local government and state government works. So moving forward here, so roughly about a year ago, I was contacted by the petitioners group here that was interested in doing something with government here in the city of Twin Lakes. I think I was like referred to somebody who referred me to somebody, to I think to get the contact with Pat here. And it was probably through some of the work I've done up in Anoka County or in Ramsey County, probably how I got contacted. And so we had a discussion, and I said, well, there's a couple of different options that you can deal with when it comes to government structure. And I laid all the options out on the table, and the petitioners group decided to collect the signatures, to use a process to put a ballot question before all of the voters as to whether you wanted to dissolve the city. And that will be on the ballot here this November. So I have monitored some of the social media that is put online here concerning events here in town. I've also read a lot of things online that are either, some of it is accurate, some of it is partially accurate, and some of it is completely inaccurate. And so hopefully we can get some of those things cleared up here today. Let's see here. The one thing that I want to make clear to everyone here is I personally have no stake in anything that happens here. I'm not a voter of your city. I'm not promised any job or anything like that. I have nothing at stake. My personal goal and why I'm here is I'm kind of a believer in local government. I like good government. I like to see government work for people. I also like to see government be responsive to people. And all of the projects I've been involved in the last 20, 30 years in various citizen groups across Minnesota here have been kind of in that same category. So that's what brings me here. But I personally don't get anything out of this other than my personal enjoyment of hopefully seeing good things happen and informed decisions being made by people. Whatever decisions you decide to do at the ballot box, that's your decisions to make. My hope is that the decisions that you will make will be well informed. So that's my goal here. So we start out with some questions. There's a couple questions that have been given to me here, and maybe I'll just start off number 1 here. Number 1 question was, should we believe information coming from city or township attorneys? It's a great question. The thing I will tell you is that keep in mind, your city attorney works for 3 of 5 city council members. The city attorney does not work for you, the citizens. They do not work for anybody else. They work for a majority of your city council. And the majority of your city council will tell the city attorney what they want discussed or not discussed. So just keep that in mind. If you ask your city attorney for a particular answer to a question, you may get a non-response, You may get a partial response, maybe you'll get a full response, but keep in mind who they work for. And the same thing goes for township. So I watched the hearing. In fact, I was here sitting at the back table here watching that hearing. And I heard the township attorney talk. I'm not going to say that the township attorney said anything that was an outright lie. That would not be accurate. There were things that he chose not to say. There was statements that were left unanswered. And why that is because again, the township attorney works for a majority of the town board supervisors. They don't work for the people of the township. They don't work for anybody else. They don't work for the people of the city. They work for the majority direction of the town board. And that's the message that they're going to take. You had a question, sir?
Am I wrong in assuming that the council members were elected by the people, the majority of the people? So when you say that they're not working for the people we elected and their attorney do work for us because they were voted in by the majority. Unless they go off road, but
let me speak a little bit more clearly to the point. The city attorney is a person who is hired under contract. That contract is with the city. It's not with the citizens. The paycheck that the city attorney receives is from the city. The city attorney works for the city. The city council members, you can make a solid argument, work for the people. But the city attorney does not work for the people. The city attorney is under contract to represent the city. That's what they do. They represent the city. They're paid for. The city council authorizes that payment. So I just always tell people up front to always keep that in mind, that a contracted city employee, a contracted township employee, or a contracted person, they work for the government entity. They don't work for the people. The only people here in this government system, either a city or a township, it could be a county board also, is the elected officials are elected by the people, they serve the people. That's the only part of the government that is directly accountable to you, not the individual employees or contractors that are hired. So my general comment is always be cautious about the information that you receive from them, because they receive their direction from the elected officials.
last thing.
Yep.
So basically you're saying, if the attorney wants to do something against the people, we have no recourse, because according to you, he doesn't work for us and can do anything he wants.
Yes, but I just put the caution in that in government theory, the elected officials are supposed to be working for what they believe are the best interests of the community. And we can all have differing opinions as to whether we think on a particular issue that they are working for the best interests of the people. But in theory, your elected officials are supposed to be working for the best interests of the community as a whole. But I want to make clear is that contractors, like a city attorney, in your city here, like many other cities, they contract with a law firm. And that law firm represents multiple cities or even multiple townships. They work for the city as an entity, or they work for the township as an entity. They don't work directly for the people. So if there is a disagreement between a citizen and the city council, the attorney for the city works for the city council. If you wanted to challenge the city in court, for example, you would be hiring your own attorney as a citizen, and then the city's hired attorney would be representing the city in a courtroom type of situation, which is what you had when the dissolution petition came forward with the Court of Administrative Hearings about the question of whether to place the question on the ballot. So I know I'm getting a little into the weeds here, but just wanted to make that make sure everybody understood that. So in other words, if you hear information that comes from the city attorney or the township attorney, feel free to question that information. Don't be shy about questioning whether you think that that is right or accurate or correct in your opinion. So, because keep in mind that the city attorney or the township attorney is giving their opinion, and they're giving an opinion based upon the direction that the elected officials have given them. And what my understanding here is that a majority of the city council in this city is not in favor of the petition to dissolve the city, and that a majority of the town board is not in favor of the petition to dissolve the city. Now, they could have their own reasons why, and maybe there's reasons that are completely different from anybody else's, but that's my understanding as to what the political situation is. The next question I've got on my list here is this is a big question. What happens to the water and sewer system operations? Okay, so a little bit of background. I've actually kind of been through this particular issue to a certain extent. So we had, in one of the towns that I represent at the legislature, one of our state legislators brought up the question of, because the city needed assistance from the legislature to help repair their sewer and water system. And millions of dollars is what this project's cost. And you're facing some of those same problems here. So the question was raised by one of our state representatives, could you just turn off the water and sewer system and go to well and septic? That was, and I said, you know, I don't know, and that's a great question. Let's get the engineering people in here and let's get a meeting together to see what comes out of this. So we did do that. And what we were informed of by the engineering firms is that the state of Minnesota will not allow a municipal water and sewer system to be turned off. They won't allow it. That's not an option. It just simply is not an option. So we also took a look at, let's presume we set that aside. Let's say it is an option in Minnesota to do that. Is it economically feasible to do that? And the answer was no, it's not economically feasible for everybody in a small town like this to dig their own wells, install their own septic systems. That is not economically feasible. So on both tests, government safety and security standards, that failed. On an economic test, it failed. So no, the sewer and water system is not being turned off. What would end up happening is, I can tell you, counties, cities, townships, state of Minnesota, any of these entities can run a sewer and water system. Running a sewer and water system means hiring somebody who knows how to run a sewer and water system and have them run the system. And then the cost of that is paid for by the ratepayers. And that's the system that we have in Minnesota. You have what's called an enterprise fund. We have an enterprise fund in my city, in Roseville. And that enterprise fund collects money from the sewer and water bills and is used to pay for the maintenance and operation of the sewer and water system. So if this particular water system here goes from control of the city to control of the township, you just hire somebody to maintain it. No elected officials are going to be maintaining the sewer and water system in any town anywhere. Professional people are hired to do this type of stuff. So no, so bottom line is utilities are not being turned off. All the town board would do, just like your city would do, is hire somebody to operate and manage the system. So that's the straight answer to that. The government, the health department, they will not allow a sewer and water system to be shut off. That's a deal breaker. Not happening in Minnesota. So, any questions on that sewer and water stuff, since I know that was a big one that some people had? I could talk all day about sewer and water stuff if you want to hear me. So, okay. Next question was, let's see here. If the city is dissolved, what does it become? Under Minnesota law, what ends up happening is, and this was discussed at that hearing that was held by the chief judge of the office of the court, now called the Court of Administrative Hearings, is that if the city government were to dissolve and disappear, this area would become part of Nunda Township. And that's because the township is surrounding this whole entire area, so it would just revert back to a township form of government. That's what would end up happening. I think there is roughly 200 people or so that live in Nunda Township. There's roughly 200 and some people that live here in the city, so then what you'd have is a township of 400 and some people. So, and then this system of government would revert from a city system of government to a town or township form of government. So that's, there are some scenarios where different things could happen, like if your city was split between two different townships, that different things could happen if that was the case. But luckily, the map is pretty simple here. So another positive thing you've got going for you here is that you don't have debt. So the statute, Minnesota law, has a statement in there that says that if a city were to dissolve and you had debt, that debt has to be paid for by the people who lived in the old city limits. That debt doesn't get passed on to other people. But you don't have debt, so that's not an issue. Question would be is what happens to the assets of the city? The assets of the city would become the assets of the township or the town and the town board. So my understanding is that the town board or the township here doesn't have a lot of assets. I think I was told that they don't even have a town hall building that's heated or air conditioned, is my understanding. So it would be up to the town board to decide what they would want to do, but I'm just kind of using a little bit of common sense. I would presume that probably the new Nunda Township would end up probably putting its headquarters here, I would guess, because it would probably be the best property. I would presume all the properties that the town would then have, the city plus whatever the township owns, this would probably be the best facility to have a meeting room at, would be my guess. So, but again, that would be up to the town board to decide, and would also potentially be up to the citizens at the annual meeting to decide, which is another topic of conversation, which we'll get to in a quick minute here. Let's see here. Best source of information on what a township is. Okay, so I did not bring copies for everybody because this is a rather thick book here. There is a group called the Minnesota Association of Townships, www.mntownships.org. This is the website to go to. They've got a manual here called Manual on Town Government 2026. This is on the internet. Find this, spend a couple of days reading it, because it'll take you a couple of days to read it. This has everything about townships, town government, powers, legal authority, so on and so forth. And they have another 10 more documents. They're smaller than this one. They've got a dozen different documents on their website that will answer every question. It will point you to the state laws that address towns, where it is in the statute book, all that type of stuff. I mean, I've got another one here. This one is the 2022 Town Law Book Index. This helps you find the laws that impact towns. There's another one back here that's called Chart of Urban and Non-Urban Town Powers. Another exciting read. So there's lots of information that is out there on how town governments work, what's the difference between a town and perhaps a city. So lots of great info. Question back there.
I thought it was an option for the township to decline, and what would that mean then county-wise?
My understanding and kind of from what I've gathered from the hearing that was held, and my understanding of the law is that the town board can express its opinion at the hearing, but they have no say. They don't have any veto authority. They can oppose it, and but they have no vote. So if the citizens of this city vote in November to dissolve the city of Twin Lakes, this area will be merged with Nunda Township, whether Nunda Township likes it or not, whether their town board agrees with it or not. That's what will happen. That's the hierarchy that exists in state law. So there is no ability for the residents here to say, we would like to be something else or go someplace else or whatever. That is the system and the process of what happens. So this would become part of Nunda Township. The only exceptions to something like that, there are probably some rare exceptions that would exist somewhere in the state of Minnesota for some bizarre reasons, but none of them that I would know of would apply here. So we do have a couple of places in Minnesota. In fact, Fort Snelling area is technically called unorganized territory. There is no township there. The local government is actually Hennepin County, is the underlying government entity if you're by Fort Snelling in that area. So there's no towns and no cities there. It is unorganized territory in Hennepin County. So, townships. Maybe we'll talk about townships. I've been to town board meetings. I've been to town annual meetings. It's an interesting process. I like townships. I like that form of government. There's a lot of good things about it. I am by no means an expert. I don't live in a township. I am not a 25, 30-year veteran of townships. So I can give you a rough overview of townships. But again, this book here, from like the manual on town government, this is like the Bible of towns. So a couple basic things I can tell you about the township form of government. Start out big here. Minnesota is a place that has lots of government. We got lots of government here. Lots of levels of government, more so than other parts of the country. If we just go south a couple of miles here to Iowa, Iowa has townships, but they don't have township governments. My understanding is in Iowa, counties are the administrators of activities that happen in townships. Minnesota and a couple of other states have town board supervisors and have elected officials at the town level. I think that I was out in Orac Township. Maybe that's another bullet point I'll also tell you too, is that there are townships in Minnesota that have thousands of people living in them. So everybody's got this impression that a township is like 100 people or 200 people. No, we've got townships in Minnesota that range from 0 people to several thousand people. And where those larger townships are located that I've been to are on the I-95 or I-94 corridor from the Twin Cities to St. Cloud. There's a couple of townships there that have several thousand people living in them. There was a township up in northwest Minnesota that, due to the Red River flooding, everyone moved out of the township. And so Senator Leroy Stump had to bring a bill before the legislature to dissolve the township form of government because there was no one left to vote to dissolve the township. Because there was no one living there because of the flooding. So that was kind of a humorous bill.
Wow.
So we have townships that range from 0 to thousands. What makes a town different than a city is in a township, you do have elected officials, and there'll be town board supervisors. They're usually called seat A, seat B, seat C. You a lot of times have an elected clerk or treasurer, or maybe an elected clerk treasurer that's merged together. The town board supervisors run the day-to-day business of the township. But where it separates from a city is that in a city, as residents, you cede your authority to 3 of 5 elected officials to set the tax rate, to set taxes, to decide major issues are decided by a 3-vote majority of your city council. In the township form of government, those decisions are generally, well, especially the taxation issue, they are made at the annual meeting. And in many cities, I think in all cities, the state law requires that the annual meeting be held on a specific date. I think it's in May is when it's held. And residents of the town show up to the annual meeting and you vote to set the tax levy. Residents vote to set the tax levy. Residents will vote, if the town board supervisors say, hey, we want to spend $1 million on roads. Well, where are they going to get that $1 million? The residents of the township need to show up to the annual meeting and you vote on appropriating that and raising taxes to do that. In a city form of government, you've given that authority away to your elected officials. They set the tax rate. You only get to replace the elected officials every November at the ballot box. Now, at the one town board meeting that I was at most recently in a township up between St. Cloud and the Twin Cities, they were talking about a trash collection issue that the town members were opposed to. So we had about 200 and some people show up to the annual meeting, and a motion was made from the floor by one of the residents to prohibit the town board from having any discussions on this particular trash issue. There was also a little bit of anger about meeting minutes being available in a timely fashion. And so one of the residents got up and said, I want to make a motion that meeting minutes be available within 7 days after the annual meeting and after all of the town board meetings. And that passed overwhelmingly. The other thing they did in this particular township is they held technically 2 annual meetings. They held their one in May that they're required to hold to by law, and then they recessed, and then they call another annual meeting in like October, where again, they get everybody in the town. If you're an eligible voter, you get to show up, you get to vote at the meeting, make motions, so on and so forth. So they have, and in many of these townships that are larger, they will have a 2-part annual meeting. So they will recess the first meeting in May, and then they'll come back in September, October, November for another meeting. So township form of government requires more civic activity by you, the people. When you have a city, you elect 5 people, and they just handle it. You know, there's really no role beyond, you know, you can show up to public hearings, maybe there's public comment or something like that, you can voice your opinion, but you don't have much of a legal role in a city. You just elect those 5 people and move on. In township form of government, you do have a legal role. In addition to the monthly meetings that the town board likely has, there's the annual meeting where your vote is required. You have a vote to set things like the tax levy and major public policy issues. So that is about all I have off the top of my head. I know it's a lot to take in, but is there any questions about anything that I could potentially answer? Yes, sir.
Okay. Townships that aren't us
Yeah.
sound great, but it really has nothing to do with what we're facing.
Yeah.
According to what you just said, if I understand it correctly, we're roughly, I'm gonna talk we're is the town.
Yep.
The townspeople are roughly the same number of people as they are, so when we join them, they double.
Yeah.
And according to you, they had a meeting, they don't want us to join them.
Yeah.
And voted on it.
Yeah.
So why would we want to get rid of our town, which is smaller group, easier to control, join a group that said they don't want us to what? I mean, I don't want to seem, but what's in it for me? I haven't seen anything. It doesn't sound like our assets are gonna disappear to the greater good of all the people, the 400 or whatever, instead of us. Good question. I live in the trailer park, now I'm branded. How will it affect the trailer park?
You asked excellent questions, and those are some of the things that people need to think about, is the question of whether a town government is better than the city government, the question of whether you want to be within this group of 200 people, or whether you want to be in the group of 400 people, those are excellent questions. And there's 1,000 different answers to those questions. I mean, like, one example could be is, you could say that it's a good idea to merge the city and the township into one entity, because then you would have direct control over taxation. That would be something that some people would say, that's my most important issue. I want to have a vote on the tax levy, and that's my number one concern. And that's why I want to support the township form of government. That could be one person's opinion. Another person could step forward and say, like exactly what you're saying, is that, well, I feel that I can impact certain policy issues if this remains a city, because there's less people that I would have to lobby. Let's say if the city wants to come up with an ordinance to ban horses, I don't know, there could be 1,000 different things you could think of that you could pass a law for. Or maybe it's this, all this marijuana, municipal weed stores, and all these other type of stuff that's going on in the state of Minnesota currently. You could say that if we were a city, then we would have to lobby fewer residents. Or if I wanted to run for the city council, that I would only have to door knock half as many homes than if it was the township and the city was together, I'd have to door knock twice as many homes. So there's no simple answer to the question of whether one is better than the other. It's all dependent upon what your personal issues are, or how you rank things in importance. So I
still want to know,
yeah.
What does it do for me to join this bigger group?
What are your priorities? What is important to you? That's the
I
question.
want to live to be 1,000. I'd love to have millions of dollars. The usual stuff. And just so you know, in all honesty, I've lived here 20 years,
Yeah.
and have, until recently, not one thought in my tiny little brain about the government of the town.
Yeah.
I figure if the streets are still there and the water and stuff is still on, why do I want to become involved in it when there's so many other things I could be doing?
Maybe the answer to your question is it will have no impact either way.
Well,
I
but
mean,
I don't
that's-
know. How does it affect a trailer park? That's what I live in.
Yeah.
How will it affect the trailer park to be in the township rather than the town?
To the best of my knowledge, it would probably have no impact at all. Devil's in the details, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there would be any impact one way or the other. I mean, it's just like with your water system. The cost of your sewer and water bills is going to remain the same regardless of whether you are in a city, a township, a state-controlled entity, or whatever, because it is a segregated enterprise fund system where the users of the sewer and water system pay for the sewer and water system. So that's another thing there, where the level of government and who happens to be in charge of it is probably going to have little to no impact on it. Now there are two different things that did pop into my head that there is an impact on, but my understanding here is that this may not necessarily impact you the way the law says it should. So under Minnesota law, cities are responsible for paying for police services. They're not provided by any other level of government in a city. So there are cities like in Ramsey County, the city of Shoreview, the city of Arden Hills, they don't have their own police department. They pay Ramsey County to police their cities. So cities are responsible for paying for law enforcement. Now, maybe the Freeborn County Sheriff's Office hasn't been sending you a bill, but they could send you a bill, because that's the way the system works. In a township, that cost is borne by the county taxpayers. The townships do not hire a police department or have a police department that polices their town in the state of Minnesota. Second one was prosecution of laws. So the county attorney your elected county attorney in Freeborn County here, they are in charge of prosecuting all felonies, no matter where they occur in the county. That's the county attorney's job. In a city is responsible for paying for misdemeanor criminal prosecutions. You will have a city prosecuting attorney. So if somebody gets a parking ticket, or I don't know, they get a ticket for driving drunk, DWI or something like that, normally that would be a city prosecutor that is paid for out of city taxes that would prosecute that. In a township, those responsibilities are the county attorneys. County attorney prosecutes all of those types of crimes, is generally how it's done. How it may be done in Freeborn County could be a little bit different. I got the impression that perhaps you don't really have many prosecutions here for those types of crimes, and maybe the county attorney, they just handle it, it's just taken care of. But generally the system would be is that cities have to pay for these things, towns do not. A third item that comes up, which is not going to impact you here, but it would be when the state owns land in your area, they issue a payment to townships in lieu of taxes. So if the state has a big wildlife reserve, and therefore there's no tax money collected by that, the state of Minnesota will give a check to the township to compensate them for lost tax revenue if that land was taxable. That does not happen in cities. And the city of Columbus, up in the Twin Cities, found that out the hard way. When they transferred from the township of Columbus to the city of Columbus, I think is how it went, they were like, what happened to our check? We didn't get it this year. And that's when they got the news that said, well, because you decided to vote to become a city, you no longer get the check anymore. So there are a couple of quirks like that that exist in the law. So in those cases, they would have an impact on the bottom line. Now, another impact here is, I believe this city here gets a certain amount of what's called LGA, local government aid, which is a state-funded program that gives money to cities. There is also aid programs that gives money to towns. How that offset will work, I do not know. That's a mathematical formula. That's something for somebody over at the Department of Finance in the state of Minnesota to figure those numbers out. So a township would not get the local government aid the city would be getting, but perhaps the township would get an increase in township aid because the size of their township doubled in population. So, any other questions or comments?
Could you list like the major things we gain by going one way or the other?
Well,
because from what you told me, you said you elect the people, which I'm familiar with, because that's kind of how our country works. So what's the difference between a township and that? They have their meetings, we have our meetings.
The biggest difference, in my opinion, between a city and a township is in a city form of government, you are ceding a lot of your, you are ceding a lot of your rights and responsibilities to 5 elected officials to make decisions for you. That's what a city does. Now, some will argue, if you're a city the size of Roseville with 35,000 people, that perhaps you need to elect people and cede authority to them so that they make decisions on your behalf, because maybe it's unreasonable for 35,000 people to get together and have public votes on things. And that generally in a city of that size, you'd have maybe referendums in November or some type of deal that would be on the ballot box. Getting back to cities of this size here, in a township form of government, you are not ceding as much of that authority that you have to your town board supervisors. You are retaining a lot of that authority for yourself. That's where that annual meeting comes in. That's where it comes into residents showing up to the annual meeting And that means you gotta go to the annual meeting. Don't just, I don't feel like going today, there's something better to watch on TV. No, it's your civic duty to go to the annual town hall meeting and to cast the votes for either the tax levy or you've got an issue, whatever it may be. You're tired of the chickens in the neighborhood, I don't know what it may be, the roosters, and you decide you wanna make a motion for whatever it may be, or you're upset that you want the town board to have a website. You want the meeting minutes to be posted online. You want the town board to have their meetings posted on YouTube. So you show up to the annual meeting and you stand up and say, I'm blah, blah, blah citizen, I live over here, and I would like to make a motion to direct that the town board go and take all of your meetings and record them and put them on YouTube. Is there a second to the motion? Somebody across the room says, I'll second that motion, there'll be discussion. And then there'll be, okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. And if the majority of the people at the annual meeting say aye, this is what we're gonna do, then that ends up happening. At a city council level, you're gonna have to then choose to elect at least 3 elected officials who later on will go to a city council meeting and pass a motion to do the same thing. So that's your major differences, is citizen involvement is required more so in a town government. In a city government, you're ceding that authority away to the 5 elected officials that you elect in November. Yes?
Am I wrong? Didn't you say that they go to this meeting once a year
Yeah.
to do their stuff? We elect our officials once a year to do our stuff. Right?
No.
You said they vote every year.
Well, let me rephrase that. So there will be, at the city level, you vote every other year in November for city council members.
Oh, okay, you vote, okay.
That's what I meant by saying that. In a town form of government, there are 2 voting dates, depending upon what the residents of the township have picked. Townships originally had votes in May. I think it was in May, so I remember the date in May. And many townships still have that May voting date. There's where you would elect the town board supervisors every other year. Many townships have moved their May elections for town board supervisors to November to coincide with everybody else's election. So they're doing the same thing. They're electing supervisors every other year. And those supervisors, just like the city council, are holding meetings, maybe it's once a month, twice a month, to run the day-to-day affairs of the town or the day-to-day affairs of the city. The difference between them is, in the town form of government, there is an annual meeting of residents where residents get to vote on certain things, make motions, raise issues. That does not exist. See, maybe, and this will get to a point that some people have raised here, and that is this issue of public comment. A lot of people here, I've seen the videos, everything, people are upset about public comment. Under Minnesota law, off the top of my head here, in a city, the city council is required to take public comment on the truth and taxation hearing, which is in December. And by the time you have the truth and taxation hearing, the levy is pretty much set, the budget is pretty much set. I don't even know why we have a truth and taxation hearing meeting, is worthless, but that's what the law is. So in December, you have 1 opportunity to speak at the truth and taxation hearing in the city. The city council has the authority to limit the time of speakers to something that is reasonable. So maybe it's 1 minute. In some places, it's 30 seconds. Then the other time in a city government where citizens have a right to speak is the passage of an ordinance. Passage of an ordinance requires a public hearing. In a public hearing, they are required to take public comment. There is probably certain land use issues that require a public hearing. Then they are mandated by law. Now again, it may be 30 seconds apiece. I can tell you in the city of St. Paul and the city of Minneapolis, that is the only time they ever accept any public comment from anybody, is when Minnesota law mandates that they have to. They don't accept any comment beyond that. Other cities can add more comment if they wish, but they are not required to under the law.
There you go.
At the town system of government, you have the annual meeting. That's the citizens' meetings. That's the citizens' meeting. That's their meeting. If the citizens want to put forth a motion, I can't say for a fact, but I would presume it probably would be in order, and that the town board supervisors would probably comply with it even if they didn't have to. If the residents at the town annual meeting said, we want 5 minutes set aside at the beginning of every town board meeting for public comment, and all the people, you had 150, 200, 250 people in the town are at that annual meeting, and they all say, that's what they want, I'm thinking that would probably end up happening. I mean, it's just looking at, the politics of things here. So, that's the citizens' meeting, is that annual meeting. And like I said, in many townships, they will have a 2-part annual meeting. They will recess it in May, and then they will reconvene it in September or October for part 2. That doesn't exist at the city. There is no annual meeting at the city level. There is never an opportunity in a city form of government for a resident to stand up in the back of the room and say, I would like to make a motion. That doesn't exist. That's not there. That is only in the town form of government. Yes?
From what you said, why is there any cities?
Well, that's a very good question. Why are there cities? Couple of things is, no, that's a good question.
But what I'm wondering is,
Yep.
this has been a city for a really long time.
Correct.
I've been here 20 years. And in that 20 years, until
Yep.
just recently, what changed? Why everybody's all excited now? What changed? Did the way we govern change? Did our rules change?
Okay.
Obviously the people changed, but are we not running it the same way it was run for the last 10 years or whatever, prior years?
Okay, you have a couple questions tied in there. You've got multiple questions there, so I'll try to break them out here. One reason why an area may choose to become a city is to prevent themselves from being absorbed by another city. For example, I'll give Maplewood, where 3M corporate headquarters is off of I-94. The city of St. Paul back in, I'm going to guess it was the late 1940s, probably 1950, was talking about, 3M is building a brand new corporate headquarters in unincorporated township area next to St. Paul. We would like that to be in the city of St. Paul because there's lots of tax dollars that we could get out of that. So there were some rumblings about St. Paul wanting to annex that portion of the township. I can't remember the name of the township off the top of my head. But then some citizens got together and said, no, we would like to create our own city to block St. Paul from absorbing that area, and that is what is now called Maplewood. So sometimes the tactic of becoming a city is to block your neighbor from eating you up. Now that is not applicable here, but that is many reasons why areas end up becoming a city. Other possibilities, well, to get to kind of the second half of your question, I have no idea. And why did this particular area decide to incorporate as a city 100 years ago? Something like that? 75, probably 100 years ago. Why did it do so 100 years ago? I have no idea, and to a certain extent, it may not matter. Because 100 years ago, government, the law, everything was different. The reasons why this area chose to incorporate as a city, those factors likely don't exist today. They just don't exist today. Tax laws could have been different. I understand there was a railroad that went through here. Maybe that had something to do with it. But whatever those factors are, likely probably don't exist today. I mean, I can tell you that, maybe this is another bullet point to throw down there. No one, this city under today's laws would not be allowed to exist. And the reason why is that the legislature, I don't know if this is maybe 10, 20 years ago, decided to there's an economic, what's the term I'm looking for here? There's an economic viability test that now exists to form a city. The last thing that the state of Minnesota wants are more cities that require local government aid and essentially welfare for cities programs and need more cities to subsidize. That's the last thing that the state of Minnesota has an interest in. So there's an economic viability test that would exist. So there's a new city that's actually being created, I believe, abutting Bemidji, if I'm not mistaken. It was just in the newspaper here a couple weeks ago or a month or two ago. And they had to go before a particular government agency. There was an economic viability test to make sure that they could actually raise the tax dollars to run what they were proposing would be the new city. And part of the reason why they wanted to create a city is I think they did not want to be eaten up by Bemidji next door. That's what was driving it. And so they passed that economic test, and that's why they were granted by the, I believe the Court of Administrative Hearings, the same court that dealt with this petition, to become a city. So there's an economic viability test that would exist. People don't know this probably, but we have more cities in Minnesota than the state of California has. We have, 5 million people living here, something like that. California has 50 million people living there, and we got 2-3 times more cities than California has. We have 2 mobile home parks in Minnesota that are cities. The Hilltop and Landfall, the city of Hilltop and the city of Landfall, they're mobile home parks. That's what they are. They're mobile home parks that incorporated as cities. Because back, World War II era, before that, immediately following that, any group of people could get together and say, hey, let's get the neighborhood together and let's become a city. And that was allowed back then, not allowed today. So it's a long answer to your question, but you're asking what has changed, whatever. I'm just saying that whatever created this city 100 years ago, those particular factors likely they don't apply today, which gets me maybe to another point here. Somebody said, if the city were to dissolve, we would lose our history. And I would make the argument that no, the history of the city is what would be in the Freeborn County Historical Society. That's where the history is stored. The Freeborn County Historical Society, like all county historical societies, can receive funding from the state of Minnesota in order to develop programs, so on and so forth. That's where the history is. You don't create or keep a government entity for historical purposes. You keep it and you use it because it works. And if it doesn't work, you get rid of it and you find something that does work. So history is not that's a poor excuse for keeping anything operating of a government entity. Governments change, come and go. Keep in mind, we're only 250 years old here in the United States. So Rome was around, the Roman Empire was around for 1,000 years. So we're only at 250. So
Last question, I promise.
Go ahead.
You said governments change.
Yeah.
Why should we get rid of our city when you said governments change?
Yeah.
Why don't we just decide to vote in whatever the people want, to have it run the way they want it to be run? And why go through all the trouble to not be a city?
Well, but
particularly because Nunda has said they don't want us.
Well, no,
I don't know if you've been in places where people don't want you.
What referendum after a town hall meeting and fully educating the residents of Nunda Township, what referendum occurred after that? None. The Nunda Township I think I can say pretty confidently that Nunda Township has not had a meeting of everybody of their town where they've gotten everybody together to have like a forum with multiple people to do question and answer and to kind of flush out some of the things that we've talked about here. I'm sure that's never occurred. What you have is the opinion of a couple of town board supervisors, which I'm not sure whether they are informed opinions or marginally informed opinions or uninformed opinions. I don't know. I have no idea. So that's unclear. But regardless, why not elect different elected officials? That's a choice that you have. If you want to elect a different mayor, different city council members in this city, you certainly can. Battle it out at the ballot box in November. It'll take 2 election cycles to rotate all 5 of the elected officials. But keep in mind, you still will have a city form of government. You won't have the annual meeting. You won't have the township form of government if you replace city council members. So this is a bigger decision. That's why in the beginning I talked about how the personalities are really not a factor here. The bigger question that people here need to discuss amongst themselves is, are you interested? You can always replace city council members. What's a little bit more challenging is asking yourself, would we like to explore a different form of government, a different way of doing things, maybe taking some power back, taking some responsibilities back so that, we have that annual meeting where we make decisions versus ceding that authority to the city council. So that's why I say the personalities are interesting here, but this is a bigger decision than, this really isn't personalities. I think that small towns like yourself, even if you have 5 awesome city council members that you loved, and they were the greatest people in the entire city, this is still a good discussion to have. There's still reasons to have these type of discussions as to whether this is the type of government that you want or don't want, and what are the pros and cons. So, yes?
Let's say the vote in November is to dissolve, that passes. And is there a 6-month thing, what happens? And if you say the township votes in May, would you get notified to go to that meeting? Or how does that all work?
Well,
Do you know?
What I do know is that there is a 6-month transition period that would occur. What I'm not entirely sure of is when that 6 months begins. So what I do know is it cannot begin any earlier than the vote being certified. So the election day, you'll have the vote. It usually takes 3-4 days before the votes are canvassed. The county does their checks and double checks, and absentee ballots and stuff come in. I'm going to presume that perhaps the county board may perhaps play a role in that. Maybe it's the city council that would play a role in certifying the vote. So the 6 months either begins from that day forward, or there's a possibility that the 6 months may begin on January 1st. I'm kind of leaning towards when the vote is certified is when the 6 months begins. So we do have a question that I have in my mind is, it's probably like, we're talking like we're off by 6 weeks as to when that would be. So there's a 6-month transition period. How things get intertwined with the annual meeting, I think that how the calendar could possibly end up working is that the day that the city dissolves, you would be citizens of the township. On what date that would be, I'm not precisely sure. And then on what date the annual meeting is for the township, that I don't have off the top of my head either. That'd be a good thing for somebody to find out what that specific date. It's set in statute. So it's every township across Minnesota has that date. Another thing I'm also unsure of is whether Nunda Township has the November elections, or do they have the spring elections for town supervisors? So there could be an election that comes in there right after the point that the city dissolves. What I will tell you is that what I know about the legislature is that 6-month window of that transition. Nobody in state law ever put that 6 months in there calculating things out, like when you could participate in township business. That was not a consideration. Somebody just picked up off the top of their head and said, you know what? Probably if this happens, they probably need 6 months to get the affairs in order. So we'll just put 6 months in the statute. Somebody could have said 8 months. Somebody could have said 5 months. And whatever legislators passed that particular law, that's what it would be. So on that day that the city would dissolve, that next day, the next business day or whatever, you would be citizens of the town. So there's work that would have to be done in that 6 months. Somebody had raised the question of, what about various laws that are on the books, and how would some of that stuff transfer everything? How would your municipal water and sewer system here, that would become the responsibility to contract the people that run that system for you? That would shift over to the town board. You know, that's what that 6 months window is that there's work to be done, and there's a role for you to play in that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there's major changes. If you've got somebody who's running your sewer and water system today, why would that change? If they know what they're doing and they're working and they're being paid or whatever else, it doesn't really matter who signs the contract, I guess, as long as they get their check, right? You're gonna continue to pay your sewer and water bill. Doesn't matter where you're mailing it to or what box you're dropping it off at, you're still gonna be paying your water and sewer bill. So that doesn't have any impact on things. You know, what Nunda Township wants to do with all of the assets of the entire new town, like I said, I think common sense says is that Nunda Township moves their operation here. I mean, if I were a gambling person, that's what I would say, but that's a decision perhaps for the town board to make, or perhaps it might be that annual meeting is where some of those decisions might be made also. But that's what the 6 months transition is for. Also keep in mind, you're going to, I mean, if the vote happens, and the vote's gonna happen, if the vote passes and this city is dissolved, Nunda Township is going to have to address these things with the help of the town board attorney, and probably working with the city's attorney also. You know, these attorneys, your town board attorney, your city attorney, they're professionals. So keep in mind, I kind of beat up on city attorneys every so often. I kind of like to do that. That's what I do. I have sometimes adversaries with them. But they are professionals. The people that are hired to work for the city, the people that are hired to work for the town, they are firms. They're not individuals. They are law firms that specialize in small cities. The township attorney, I looked them up, they specialize in dealing with townships. They're professionals, they're members of the bar, they have certain codes of ethics that they have to apply. They will end up working together to make all of this type of stuff happen. That will be a job for them to do. And there's nothing that tells me that they would act unprofessionally in doing what their responsibilities are, because they have other clients. Keep in mind, you know, nobody wants to burn bridges in one city attorney told me, he said, short story here. So we signed a contract with a law firm for a couple $100,000 to hire a law firm to represent the city of Roseland. There was a clause in the contract that said you had to provide a 6-month notice in order to break the contract. One of our council members asked the attorney, said, well, what if we just decide we want to cancel the contract next week and not honor the 6 months? And he said, well, here's what the story is. He said, I'll be blunt with you. He said, the last thing we want to do is look bad working with a particular city government. If you guys told us that you don't want to honor the 6-month agreement and you want us to leave next week, we'll leave next week. We represent multiple cities and counties and other governments. We don't need a bad reputation of being difficult working with elected officials. That's the attitude that you would have, is that they would work to do what they needed to do to get the job done. They're not going to burn bridges, they're not going to do a poor job, because that reflects on them professionally, and that will impact other governments hiring them. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth on that. Okay, anything?
question for you.
Yep,
Fire department's right next door here.
yep,
None of the township does not have a fire department. They contract, I believe, with Emmons.
yep.
What happens when that happens? What happens to our insurance rates?
Okay, so that's two questions,
Yeah,
two different questions. Okay, so let's start, now, when you talk about insurance rates, are you talking about homeowners insurance?
homeowners.
Okay, so, homeowners insurance, I'm not an insurance person, I'm not an insurance agent or anything like that. But from the sounds of it here, you're going to have fire protection from somebody. That the fire department's not gonna disappear, nobody's, homes aren't gonna just start arbitrarily burning down to the ground. There's going to be fire service that's going to come from somewhere. So how that impacts your insurance rates as to where the fire service is coming from, my gut instinct is that it'll have little impact. And the reason why is that all of the fire options that you have around here are departments that are classified probably at the same class level. Now, we had this discussion in my city because when I was mayor, we had a volunteer firefighting department in Roseville. But next door was the city of St. Paul, which is a full-time ambulance providing, full-time staff, top level classified. I think they're actually rated a category 2, and I think we were a category 3 or 4. So that impacted fire ratings. So if we would have wanted St. Paul to come in to do our fire work, that could have lowered our bills a little bit because it would have been a higher class department, but I don't see that changing here. Another factor was number of fire hydrants, was what we were told by the rating people. Well, we have fire hydrants in Roseville. Now, the city of North Oaks, north of us, they don't have fire hydrants in that city. Long story, but they don't. So that impacts their fire ratings. The number of fire hydrants you have is not going to be impacted by any form of government here. So that's not going to impact your rate. So that's what tells me that your homeowner's insurance rates are probably not going to be impacted much at all, because it's just going to be, the name on the fire truck might be different perhaps, and that's going to be it. The level of service is likely not going to change. It's going to be what it is. Now, your first question was, what happens to the fire department? So I've kind of taken a look around to see what's going on here, and I've listened to some of the meetings, and I was very shocked to find somebody said that the town of Emmons could send a fire truck through your city out the other side to get to a fire in another part of the township. And my reaction was that is, you have got to be joking me. And I'm like, that's insane. That doesn't make sense. I was in Mesa, Arizona, back about 20 years ago in the mayor's office. Mesa, Arizona's got 460,000 people. The mayor was telling me that how they do firefighting in Mesa, Phoenix, Scottsdale, is whatever department is closest to the fire shows up to the fire. We don't care what the name is on the side of the truck, because fire service is about quick response, right equipment, right people, getting there and getting the job done. We don't care what the name is on the door. And
They are changing that in Fremont County now.
There needs to be, perhaps this is a project for people in this area, is there needs to be a sit-down discussion by people here, I think, to really talk about the future of fire service
John,
here.
they are switching that in Freeborn County now.
Okay,
To when
good.
they dispatch, it's the closest
That's,
fire department, it's
Yeah.
getting dispatched first, and then they have the mutual aid stuff.
yep, so what you have for equipment, what you have for personnel, I mean, people need to start thinking regionally when it comes to fire service. Just like, the county sheriff's office responds to calls across the county, multiple townships, multiple cities, the sheriff's department will respond to. And fire service needs to be thinking along those lines. Whether that is one fire department that is a joint entity. I mean, fire departments have the ability to have what's called a fire district, where there's a line drawn, and everybody within that area is serviced by the regional fire department. They are taxed for that particular service, And there's a number of different models. I mean, in my area, there is what's called the Lake Johanna Fire Department. There is no city called Lake Johanna. The Lake Johanna Fire Department is Shoreview, Arden Hills, and North Oaks. Those cities are the Lake Johanna Fire Department. There is also another entity called SBM, Spring Lake Park, Blaine, Mounds View. It is one joint powers entity that runs the fire department in 3 very large cities. They operate as one entity with multiple stations. So I can't tell you what happens here, but you've got a building here, you've got equipment here. I believe in Evans, you have a building there, you've got equipment. And there needs to be a discussion about what are response times. I mean, sometimes, in Roseville, we went through a big study, and we went from 3 fire stations down to 1 fire station. And it had to do with by going from a volunteer system to some paid people that sat at the fire station. Operating out of 1 station was quicker than having volunteers come to 3 different stations, one of them by Rosedale, which you can't get to for 6 weeks out of the year, from Thanksgiving to Christmas because of the traffic. And volunteer firefighters can't go to the fire station with lights and sirens on their personal vehicle. So we figured out putting a fire station in the middle of the city, having paid staff that are there 24/7, resulted in faster calls than dispatching from 3 different stations. And those discussions are discussions that an area like this should be having, or maybe already having. Yes?
In those combinations, the way you said entity,
Yeah.
do they not fall under any city then? They own their own assets and make their own decisions?
There are a couple different scenarios that can exist. The city of Roseville has its own fire department. The city of St. Paul has its own fire and ambulance department. And Falcon Heights, the city next door to Roseville and St. Paul, they hire St. Paul to do their fire and ambulance service in Falcon Heights. We have the Lake Johanna Fire Department, which is a joint powers board of multiple government entities that has multiple fire stations that services 3 major suburbs. And then the SBM group, Spring Lake Park, Blaine, Mounds View, same type of a deal, where I think it's like we're dealing with cities, so it's like, I think there's like 1 city council member or 2 city council members from Blaine, 2 from Spring Lake Park, 2 from Mounds View sit on a joint powers board, and decisions are made, and then they collect money not on a special taxing district. They collect it, I believe, based on number of calls, the math formula, number of calls, values of property, number of citizens, and then each city makes a payment to that joint powers entity, because cities and counties and other levels of government can form what are called, they call them JPAs, joint power agreements. And then there can be mathematical formulas as to how to fund them. Another way would be is there's a provision in statute that allows you to set a district for direct taxation through property taxes to people. So there's good and bad about each combination. With property taxes are property taxes. The state sets the formula for the value of agriculture property, homes, businesses. If it is a funding method that's based on number of calls, number of residents, well, then that's more flexible. That can be, so that's why you see different funding models that exist. So how it would work here, that's a community decision to figure out. But this idea of having small fire departments and people going all over the place and stuff, we've got to stop doing that in government, in Minnesota, everywhere. It just does not, I see too much of that, and it's inefficient, and it does not serve the public well. Nobody has ever, I've been to a lot of different emergency situations, being a reserve officer and being a mayor, and nobody has ever said when a vehicle shows up on the scene, they don't go, gosh, I was really hoping that a car with a different city logo on it showed up. Nobody's ever asked that. Or I hope it's a fire truck that has a different color. Nobody ever asked that. They want the fire put out, they want property saved, lives saved. That's what people are looking for. Yes.
I was just curious too, since you said you have the water sewer thing.
Yeah.
Do you see that joint powers with water and sewer very often?
Yes, and so there is the, in the areas that cities that I lobby for, there are some that are on regional water. So, there's like the Lincoln Lion, regional water system. There is the Lewis and Clark water system down in southwest Minnesota. It's interesting, you can run water pipes a lot greater distance than you can run sewer pipes. And a funny thing I'll tell you is, I learned this a couple weeks ago, is that if you cannot allow sewage to run downhill, it has to be pumped downhill. Because sewage has hard particles and liquid in it, and sewage is very difficult to move from point A to point B, which is why you don't necessarily see regional sewer systems, except like in the Twin Cities. But regional water, though, is a different story. So there are many communities in southwest Minnesota that are connected through regional water. So the idea of, running a pipeline from Albert Lee all the way down here as a solution rather than dig a new well or whatever it may be, that's certainly a viable option. The sewer thing, though, is probably less of an option, but I see that. Yeah, that is, and that's how some cities in southwest Minnesota have dealt with the need for a new water treatment plant. Is, can we get on a regional water? And actually, legislators, that's one of the questions on the bonding tours. When the legislators drive around and visit these proposed projects, that's one of the first questions that they ask. Do you have a regional water system nearby that you can tap into? And
I
that's...
think Wells has a tri-city sewer arrangement.
Sure, yeah, that's, and in the Twin Cities, we have the Metropolitan Council that handles sewer, and then in my area is the St. Paul Regional Water Authority that handles multiple cities, including the city of St. Paul. So, but, the Met Council sewer system is a huge operation, and it involves pumping a lot of material all over the place. So, but yeah, that's, somebody has raised questions about, the cost of your sewer and water bills. And I saw interesting comments about that. I can tell you that the people I work with, they pay more in sewer and water than they pay in property taxes. That's greater Minnesota. That is a problem that you are all facing here. And I've spent a lot of time educating metro area legislators about, metro area legislators are shocked when they find out that you're paying, we had one city where I did the math work here, they were paying $1,500 a year for sewer and water, $700 for property taxes. It's flipped upside down. At my house, I pay $45 a month, maybe $40 a month for sewer and water, and I think my property tax bill is like $4,500. So it's completely the opposite. So and why is that happening? There's a couple of reasons, and I know some people here would like to blame your current city council members or other people like that, and it's much more complicated than that. The main reasons why your cost of sewer and water is going up so much, a couple of reasons. Number one would be your past city leaders should have been charging more for decades to build up large reserve funds in anticipation of having to do these major public projects, new pipes, new water tower, new water treatment plant, whatever it may be. That didn't happen, and you can't put all the blame on them, because that gets me to part number two. Most of these cities that I work with, they have 1 or 2 employees. That's it. In Roseville, we have 175 employees. We have like 5-6 people working in the finance department. A city of this size here, you're gonna have 1 employee. And you don't have the money to hire people that maybe can look into the future, that can see how these costs were going to go up. And I don't blame anybody for that. That didn't exist. Second thing you didn't count on was inflation. We didn't count on it. Nobody counted on inflation in the last 5 years hitting 10%. In electronic controls for sewage and water treatment plants, partially because of the tariff stuff, the cost of those electronic controls has gone up 300% in the last 2-3 years. That's because with the tariffs, they're now making those electronic controls here in the United States rather than in China or wherever else. So they're American made now, but you are paying 3 times more for those components. We also have a little dispute with Canada going on. I've been told that Canada is a supplier of cement. So the cost of concrete is impacted because it was like 12% of concrete is cement. So while the rest of the components of cement have gone down in price, or the concrete, I should say, has gone down in price, the cost of cement has gone up because of our trade issues with Canada. And nobody could forecast that. The other thing nobody forecasted was government increasing the water standards. So instead of it being 5 parts per million of X, now it has to be 1 part per million. And every time government raises those standards, you can say, well, yeah, but then we drink cleaner water. Yes, but that may add $1 million onto the cost of that water treatment plant, or another $1 million onto the cost of that sewer treatment plant. Your past leaders, you would have needed a crystal ball in order to see that coming 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So all of these things are all coming down at the same time. And that's why you've got not only city leaders here, but city leaders all over greater Minnesota that are having to deliver the bad news to their residents to tell them that the era of $25, $30 a month sewer and water bills is gone. It's on. My people I'm working with, they're battling to keep it at $100 a month. They're fighting to keep it so it doesn't get to $200 or $250 a month. And that's why I'm at the legislature seeking assistance for communities that don't have a lot of money, that can't raise property taxes because they don't have enough property value. And so they need assistance from the legislature to help complete these projects, along with USDA loans that are like 40-year loans at 1% and so on and so forth. That becomes part of the equation. And it is what it is. And there's no point in doing any finger pointing and blaming, because again, maybe you can blame somebody for 5% of it, or 10% of it, but you can't for everyone. And you're not alone. I tell you, you're not alone. You're by far not alone. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And, so we try to work through it.
Always told the truth, eh?
So we are, I can tell you, that many of us in the legislature, Representative Mary Franzen has put forth she's recognized, she's the co-chair of the Capital Investment Committee in the House. And she recognizes that the state could borrow year after year after year after year, and this problem would not be solved. There needs to be another alternative revenue source, which is why she teamed up with the DFL colleague of hers on Capital Investment to propose putting a 5-cent tax on those water bottles, on disposable water bottles for a fixed number of years, maybe 5 years, to raise X number of millions of dollars to go towards helping fund these sewer and water projects across the state, because it's a crisis. And so, but there's kind of a hesitancy to raise taxes at the legislature, understandable. But there is not enough money that can be borrowed through the capital investment bill. It was $1.2 billion was borrowed this year, $400 million towards sewer and water projects, and that just scraped the surface. There was, for every dollar that was awarded, there was $7 asks. So 1/7 got funded. Yes.
One other problem that people don't seem to understand is there's only 63, 65 places. If you spend 65 people paying $1 million, it's gonna go up. But if you have 150, 102,000 people, it's gonna come down.
Correct. And Yeah, I would say if you were to do something brand new, if we were a collection of people that were gathering and this was a empty property as far as the eye could see, we probably wouldn't build this city here today with the cost of sewer and water treatment and stuff like that. Things would be done differently if we were to start from scratch today. The problem is what do you get? The other alternative is that the state of Minnesota comes in and buys everybody out. I had a good discussion with an economic development director about that last fall with one of the towns I work with. Why not just buy everybody out? Okay, so here's the problem is, what's your home worth? The state only has the ability to pay you fair market value for your property plus relocation costs. So if you're living in a $50,000 house and maybe you get an extra $15,000 to move, so you get $65,000, where are you gonna move to for $65,000? Because you can't build a new house for $65,000. So you can't probably move to Albert Lee and buy a property and be whole. That presumes you don't have a mortgage. If you have a mortgage for $30,000, then you're only getting half that amount of money. So the idea of the state buying out mass areas and relocating people, that's not economically viable too, provided that people wanted to do that, and most people don't want to. And it's your house, your property. So those are not viable solutions either. I mean, even the river flooding, we spent as a state, we spent millions of dollars elevating a road north of St. Peter to go into the town of, I think, Henderson, because when the Minnesota River flooding goes through there, they go down from, I think, 3 points of access to 1. So the state spent millions of dollars raising a highway. The amount of money they spent on that highway, they could have bought out half to 2/3 of the town and torn it down. But that takes enormous political willpower to be able to do that. So they raised the road. So that way only one of the 3 roads would flood instead of 2. There you go. It is what it is. Anything else I can perhaps share a tiny bit of wisdom on?
Well, here that will close down the meeting, and thank you, John. I think it was very informative, and I think a lot of people learned a lot of stuff today, and we appreciate you coming down.
Yeah,
with us.
Like I said, the Minnesota Association of Townships has a great website with a lot of good information on it. They have a small staff and stuff like that puts a lot of these materials together. They have a couple of lobbyists or 2 that show up at the Capitol to lobby on town issues and stuff. So they have information there. The League of Minnesota Cities has a website also with a lot of material on that. There's a book called The Handbook of Cities that has all this stuff about city government. So there's lots of information that's out there. So there are great information resources around to learn up on this stuff.
Could you write them websites down so I can get on the computer?
Yeah, I'll let Pat take care of that. Pat, you can go take and post the Minnesota Association of Townships, League of Minnesota City web address is on